Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market, here with another Rogue Audit video where I'm going to take a look at my first 10 Rogue Roundups, this time focusing on the modern cards that I picked. So we started these back in September with Rogue Roundup number 1, and the modern card that we picked was Surgical Extraction. Here is the picture that I made for the episode. You see that Surgical Extraction was going for about $24. I suggested getting in at the $20 with the growth rate climbing. Now it is at the 56.50 with buy list price being quite reasonable, around $30 for Channel Fireball. You can probably get a better buy list directly at a vendor at a GP than the $30 because the spread on a card that is popular as Surgical Extraction should be quite thin. What went right for this card? Well, the decks like Arclight Phoenix decks got very popular, which Surgical Extraction is decent versus the Arclight Phoenix, as it can just hit it while it's in the graveyard, exile all copies of them. They still have things like Thing in the Ice, but it takes away one of their angles to winning the game. And Dredge also had a resurgence, but I really think that the main reason that Surgical Extraction was because of Phoenix taking over quite a big portion of the meta. And those early Phoenix decks were more all-in decks, where if you dealt with their graveyard, if you dealt with the Phoenixes, you actually had a pretty good chance of winning. So I expect Surgical Extraction to flatline out and then continue to go back up as the demand will increase for this card. It really needs a reprint. It's hard to reprint this card. I would hold on to these until you have a better spread of actually buy listing them if you're looking to buy list them, or to find a buyer at that 56 is probably pretty reasonable. So that would be a click over a double up if you can get over $40 from your target price if you invested in these in September. So that was a pretty good one. Then on to Rogue Roundup 2, we called Spellcaller. Spellcaller was going for $7 or $7.50 at the time. I thought to be very aggressive with these cards to pick them up as high as $7. And I think if I remember correctly, it was because Card Kingdom was offering like $6 for the buy list. Well, Spellcaller did not fare too well. Spellcaller has actually gone down since then. Card Kingdom is actually selling them for $6, and the buy list price for both the Card Kingdom and Channel Fireballs went around $2.50. So what went wrong with Spellcaller? The meta shifted. When we predicted this back in September, October, the Spirit decks were very, very prevalent. They were winning tournaments left and right, and I said it was just a matter of time before they took down a major tournament. There have been some good showings of Spirits in some of the more recent paper showings, as well as the MCQs for Magic Online. However, the Spirits have definitely fallen out of favor for other Vile decks like Humans or Death and Taxes, especially when you have to play against more unfair decks. I think Spellcaller really, really shines versus other fair decks or just the tempo of Spirits. So you can see, though, that Spirits still see quite a bit of play in Modern. Lots of Azorius and Bant, and even some Super Friends lists that run the Spellcaller. Even Jeskai decks run it in the sideboard, and even some Taxes decks. There is a Bant Eldrazi deck. There's even an Esper Eldrazi deck from time to time that can run the Spellcaller. So I like this long term. I think it's actually a pretty good point to invest back into Spellcaller. As the meta shifts, this card is a good card in the right meta, and if we do get a meta where a tempo deck can shine, like Control starts taking over Modern and Tempo is the deck that beats Control, then I think the Spellcaller is in a good position. So it's a hold. I don't think that you should sell, of course, right now. It was a bad spec at 7. This one was definitely a miss. But with the information we had, here was kind of the time period of Spellcaller where I said to invest in right around this area. It did slightly start to go up, flatlined out, and then has had that drop since then. Eldritch Moon boxes are very, very hard to come by, so the supply of this is very, very low. I think that Eldritch Moon goes for like in the 120s, 130s on the secondary market, so I don't expect any more amount of new supply. It's not a very popular card to be reprinted in something like Standard, very unpopular when it was in Standard, so I don't expect a reprint in a core set. So for those reasons, I think it's a pretty good hold or buy at this price point, but I would definitely target low, as the demand is very low for this right now, so like $3 would be a pretty good target price for the Spellcaller. Next up, we picked Arclight Phoenix. This one we actually picked for 2 weeks in a row. The first time we picked at the $2 target price, and then we bumped it up that you could still invest in it. Arclight Phoenix was absolutely a knockout of the park. I personally invested in like over 100 of these copies and it sold them, actually buy listed them for 20, I want to say 22 to 25 a piece. So Arclight Phoenix has fallen since then. It was in the Challenger decks. That's the main reason. And I actually think that Arclight Phoenix is investable again, even at this very, very rich point of around the $16 mark is what the market price is. If you can get it on these for the $12.50, I think that $12.50 is very, very reasonable for a double up with Arclight Phoenix again, once the Challenger decks do hit their critical mass and we are no longer going to drop the price. Most of the time, if you go to Targets or Walmart's or even local game stores, you'll see all three of the other Challenger decks, but not the Phoenix. So the supply has been digested into the system. People have thrown these Arclight Phoenix to make their money back on the Challenger decks. The Sulfur Falls were also in this deck. And so I don't see this card going that much further down. In fact, it looks like it's flatlined out and started to go back up. So I think it's a good spec again. I'm not going to call it for now, though, because I don't know exactly the amount of Challenger decks out there. We'll have to wait and see when we start getting some signals from distributors. If they start unloading them, that would be a better place to get in on the Phoenixes. So here was a great call. We knew that Arclight Phoenix would see play. I thought it'd take a little bit longer for people to break this card. I actually didn't see... It was my wildest dreams that actually hit both standard and modern. This was a modern spec. It wasn't for standard. I didn't think it was powerful enough for standard. It was kind of cute at the time. I'd messed around with it and failed with some of the brews that I was running with the elemental, the other one out of the Challenger deck, the one that gets +1/+1 counters whenever you cast a red spell, and it just kind of fell flat. Other people decided to go more all in on Phoenix plus some Drakes and actually did very well, and then hit in standard, and that's why you see these two big bumps. So that was a very good call. Was kind of a risky pick, was kind of unknown. I was working off of just my knowledge of just modern in general and how cards like these tend to be sleepers, and it was a good sleeper call. So we'll try to pick some of these in the future. I usually like to invest in the known, not the unknown, but you should definitely go on the limb. That's where with great risk comes great reward for sure, and Phoenix was one of those cards that did really work out for us. The next pick, and this also is a twice pick. I think I picked it for episode 5 and 7 of Rogue Roundup. Don't quote me on that. So somewhere around there, maybe it's 5 and 8. Was Eidolon the Great Revel. At the time period, we suggested getting these at around the $3 because the current growth was flat going down. It was pretty easy to find these for $3 on like Card Sphere, as well as finding on every now and again on TCG Low, or just offering your lowball offer to your local scene or other buy list throughout the internet. So Eidolon of Great Revel is now going for around $5.85. So it's had a decent little increase, but the market price is still back around the exact price that it was. So $4.75 when we called the card, and it's still about $4.75. So there's a discrepancy between the market price and the mid. I'm thinking it's because a lot of Journey to Nyx supply has entered into the system, with Journey to Nyx becoming profitable to crack again. There was a point, a window, I would say around February, March, where Journey to Nyx could still be found on places like David Adams and distributors for about the $70 to $75 range. And then people started cracking the Journey to Nyx boxes, and I think this added a new supply of Eidolons to really flatline out any sort of growth of the card. I still like it it's not going in modern. It's powerful enough for modern. It still is usually going to dish off at least 2 damage before it's dealt with, and it can just shut down many decks from comboing off. And in red, in burn, it's the perfect card. It's if you actually look at the burn list, I don't see Eidolon of the Great Revel being replaced unless they start to use some sort of creature pump variant for a burn. But again, I think that the good old classic burn will stick around, and it's been the most consistent deck, I would say, at least showing up in the modern meta since the beginning of modern, and now it's still very popular in the modern meta. You can see 38 burn decks with on Goldfish here, and even it shows up in Legacy burn. So the price point, I still think it's a very investable card. I'll probably pick it again. It's usually because I look at supply, and the supply will be low for this card for a bit, and then I'm like, okay, now's the time it's going to start spiking up, and then it's remained quite flat since we called it. So I think it was around this time period we called the Eidolon of Great Revel. So still a very solid spec, especially if you're going to park money in any sort of card. This is a good one. So I'd neither call this one a hit or a miss. I guess it's a miss because it was something that didn't pan out in a reasonable time period. Next one we called was Bloodgassed. Bloodgassed, I called it the $12, and the current price is around the 14 for the TCG mid. It was flat at the time, and I expected it to be spiking. So again, this is around this time period, October, November-ish, and it did have a bit of a spike up to around about $20 and has flatlined out since then and has gone down a little bit. The market price versus mid spread is quite large, between 17 and 18.50, and the buy list price is very, very bad right now, with Channel Fireball paying 10, but Card Kingdom only paying $7.25. I really thought that the end of the supply of Iconic Masters was near. I think what we're really seeing is just the summer months coming in. We had a bull market with Modern, especially in just singles, the singles market was very, very good at the start of the year, especially at tax return time. And I think we're entering into the market where people are looking towards sealed product, Modern Horizons. We have Commander decks coming up. We have a very popular War of the Spark. And I think that's what Bloodgassed is suffering from. There's not enough people that are, building decks or playing Modern at the moment to have Bloodgassed spike up in value. This is a very, very good card, though. It sees a lot of play in Modern Dredge and other Modern decks like Hollow One, even the Super Friends deck or Bridgevine. Lots of decks run the Bloodgassed. I don't see it going anywhere. Very, very good card for the format, and this is another great one to park your money at. You shouldn't be trying to offload your Bloodgassed right now unless you can get a reasonable amount for them. So I would hold them. 25 is probably what they'll be by the end of the year or the start of next year's tax returns, and that's a pretty decent investment. If you can make another $7 within a year off a card that was invested at $12, that's a pretty decent hold. So this one I think was a pretty good hit for the Modern format. Another one that kind of dudded was Street Wraith. This is another call because I thought that Masters 25 was definitely, especially uncommons, were investable. It's said to get in around the $2 mark. It was $2.50 at the time, and it really hasn't gone anywhere. It did spike up slightly since that time to about $3, but the market price is back down to $2.37, $2.25 low, I'm sure. And Card Kingdom and other places are not offering a very good buy list for this. And I think that's one of the reasons we did call it, is Card Kingdom was offering a razor thin buy list for Street Wraith. So I think that this is another sign that we are headed out of a bull market into more of a bearish market, especially with card singles, especially with high supply Modern cards like Street Wraith. If Card Kingdom has dumped their buy list down to this amount. But I think it's another good hold. It sees a lot of play in Modern. I actually do like this card more with Rock decks having Nimble Mongoose spoiled today. It works very well with Nimble Mongoose Death Shadow type brew, or just any sort of Delirium-based strategy, Threshold/Delirium. It also goes in Dredgevine, also goes in Hollow One, Grixis Death Shadow, Blueless Shadow. A lot of decks this goes into. Living End, which could have resurgence with some of the cards that were spoiled out of this recent set. So I like Street Wraith. I think it's another hold. I don't think it was neither a miss nor a hit. It's just stayed stagnant. And I do expect this to spike up sometime in the 2019-2020 season. All right, so that leads us to the foil Thought Scour. I like this card because the supply was actually quite low. It was a foil out of Iconic Masters. Again, I thought Iconic Masters was ending its supply run. This one is, Iconic Masters is still underneath Masters 25 by about, I don't know, $40-50. You can find boxes for still the 150s to 175 range. And Masters 25 is a little bit higher. So the supply is not done with these, but this is still a very heavily played card. I think I picked it because it was the lowest foil that was played in Modern. So it was the only heavily played foil. Yes, it was printed before. It was still under the $2 mark. So Thought Scour right now, though, has gone up to about $2.50. Again, it's had a nice increase. The buy list spread's pretty dismal, though. With being $2.50 and anything only going for $1. It's quite puzzling that Channel Fireball is offering more than Card Kingdom on a lot of these buy lists. I think it just shows Card Kingdom is trying to free up more. Maybe they're just not selling Modern at the moment. Their Card Kingdom tends to be automated based, so there isn't a human behind their pricing. A lot of the times it's based upon sales. So the more cards they sell, the higher, of course, their buy list increases, and the less cards they sell within a given time period, then their buy list decreases. It's mirrored, I think, to their price, which then does go off of the amount of sales they've had for a particular card. So I think that shows, again, that the Masters or the modern is just not heavily invested right now, where people aren't building decks or brewing decks or playing a lot of modern at the time period. And that's normal for about now. We're at the peak of standard, and rotation should have another influx of people going into standard. And then it's usually modern's time to shine at the early January through March. That's the modern season. So Thoughtscour, I think, will have next year another increase in price. Still a pretty good place to park your money unless you foresee a reprint for Thoughtscour. All right, that leads us to the last spec that was the Rogue Roundup number 10. This is Narc Amoeba. This was a long-term spec, so this was a Scraping the Barrel episode where I picked only cards that were bulk, and I still like this long-term because this does see play in Dredge, and you never know when there's other decks that this will also see play in. I think that some of the cards, the War of the Spark, the Fibble Tip, or however you call the other blue card where you can cast it from your library, I think that one is, or if it entered from your library, I think that's signaling that we're going to have other stuff that's dealing with going through your library. And then if there's a deck that can somehow use both of those cards, Narc Amoeba and that card, that could be another shelf for this particular card. The supply of Narc Amoeba isn't that high. It was Modern Masters, 2? Or Modern Masters 1. So Modern Masters 1, Future Sight, and a rare in Guilds of Ravnica. So that's not the greatest supply of this card. It's pretty much a rare twice printed. So I like this for a long-term spec. It has a lot of play in the form of Dredge. I think it's pretty much solidified itself in Dredge, and it's a good bulk card to get into, especially now that we're ending the people actually opening up Guilds of Ravnica. Now, Guilds of Ravnica might have another bit of supply entering the mix because it's approaching to where booster box prices are. If you can get in around the $70 to $80 on the booster boxes, you can actually crack these and profit if you want to do the legwork. Like the TCG low / market price, I think if you open up a Guilds of Ravnica, will get you around the $80 right now, which is pretty reasonable. If some people just enjoy that, they enjoy cracking packs and digging for foils, and then that always increases more supply into the mix. So those are my picks. We had some really good ones early. Of course, you're going to see that the ones that have the longest time to go up in value. I'd say I did a better job with Commander. Commander still is my bread and butter. It's a lot of very known demand. It's very, very easy to see that a card is, and it doesn't have like trends that fall out of favor. That's what happens with Modern is Spellcaller, for example. All of the signs at the time were suggesting that Spellcaller would be a card that should be going up with the amount it was seeing play, with the buy list spread, with the domination in the recent tournaments, and then it just fell out of favor. That doesn't really happen in Commander. Commander people build decks, they shelf the decks, and it's very rare to even replace cards out of those decks. Usually it's got to be the worst card in the deck to be replaced. And if a card is seeing a lot of play in multiple different Commander decks, it's probably not the worst card in the Commander deck that it goes into, and it has a hard time being replaced. So it's a lot easier. I still suggest people start with Commander. Commander does tend to get reprinted a lot, but a lot of times the demand still outstretches the new supply, or what will happen is the demand will, or the supply will kill the price for temporarily, and then the demand will outstretch it. We see it with like Soul Ring and Skull Clamp, and some of the boots, like Swiftfoot boots. They always get crushed after a reprint of the latest Commander set, and then they rebound within a year. So anyway, we'll take a look from time to time. We'll do Standard or Pauper. Pauper probably hasn't had much movement at all for another Rogue Audit. I like to be accountable for these type of specs. Good ones, bad ones in this one for sure. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be looking forward to your comments in the comment section below. This is Kevin with the Rogue Market. Thanks for watching.